Welcome to the Lentil Intervention Podcast, talking all things movement, whole food nutrition and environmental wellness with your hosts, Ben and Emma.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 7. My name is Ben Alderberg, coming to you from Auckland, as always, not going anywhere, and joined as always by my co-host Emma Strutt in sunny Queensland. Hello Emma.
Hi Ben, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. Now, firstly to our listeners, first question to them is, have you received our latest newsletter? If your answer is no, that's because you haven't yet subscribed. So make sure you head over to our website. At the bottom of the homepage, you will see a little box, register your email. Now, right alongside that box, you will also see the opportunity to buy us a coffee. Now, this is to help us cover our current admin costs of website and podcast hosting fees, plus the chance to help us fund some of our upcoming projects. And there's going to be more details on that very soon as we work through those. Lastly, if you do listen to this podcast on iTunes, please do consider leaving a review, as this will help our rating and reach more people. That's admin done. Emma, who have we got on the show today?
Okay, so today we are joined by the wonderful Peter Eastwood, philanthropist and founder of Tanglewood Foundation New Zealand. Peter has had a long history of successful business ventures, all starting with a humble little homebrew store many years ago, but he is now a passionate wildlife conservationist and gives back to the community and the planet by being involved in multiple conservation and education projects. Many of those projects I'm sure our listeners will be familiar with. So Peter, I know you have a very busy schedule, so we are really appreciative of you spending some time with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. It's lovely to be on your show.
Now, Peter, just like with all good stories, as I always start most of our episodes, let's start off a little bit about you, your background and how you became so passionate for activism and conservation. How did it all start for you?
See, that's a complicated question, because I came from a very different place than I am now. You know, I grew up in a reasonably poor suburb in Wainuiomata, and our family didn't have a lot of money, and worked through different jobs in different fields until ending up in the late 1980s, through the big changes we had in our economy, losing my career in textiles, which was no longer a thing in New Zealand because of the user pays thing, and falling into a home brew shop. And the idea of that was starting off as a small business to learn how to run a business. Then I was going to sell it after 6 months, but became very successful and started running it through. And running alongside that, I fell in love with Africa through reading Wilbur Smith stories, and that was my first introduction. And then I went on my overseas experience and met a couple from South Africa on my Kentucky tour around Europe, and caught up with them after that, and they introduced me to the wildlife of Africa, which started a lifelong passion for both me and all of my kids and my ex-wife. So it was a kind of, and during that time the business kept on going. Well, went from strength to strength. We expanded internationally, and starting from New Zealand, we ended up with a business that was only doing about 5% of its sales in New Zealand. Most of it was outside, most of it in Europe or America. And we sold that business 2 years ago, which has now left me free to pursue my love of wildlife. And the love of wildlife, I guess, led me towards a vegan lifestyle. It's very hard to love animals on the one side and then eat them on the other, although that was a huge, long transformation. You know, I came from a very, what you'd call a right-wing or conservative viewpoint, running a business, and when I was asked about doing good for the planet, my comment would be, that's for the bloody greenies. You know, I'm here to make money for my business and keep my people employed, and, you know, that was my role in life. And it wasn't until much later on that I realized that you can have both. You know, when we did go very green in the company, every change we made massive savings for the company. It's only, I think of all the changes we made, only one of them cost us more money, but in costing us more money, it gave us a more valuable product, and we made money out of selling a more valuable product that was greener. So it was a no-brainer. Simple things like attacking waste. So if you can reduce cardboard cartons out of your supply chain and plastic bags out of your supply chain, you can demand a cheaper price, and you're not putting so much rubbish into the environment that has to be dealt with later on. So very much less is more was our approach in the early days with the business for the environmental side of it. But on the other side, on my vegan journey, that really started with me wanting to have a lower carbon footprint, and the key to explaining that to me was Cowspiracy. I watched Cowspiracy, and I just couldn't believe that this information could be true, because how could I not know it, being an intelligent, well-educated person? Well, maybe not so well-educated, but I'm in a first world country. I couldn't believe that things like dairy being bad for me and not needing to have meat in my diet, they were so foreign to me to start with. So I gave the whole vegan thing a go, but I didn't tell anyone about it for the first month because I wasn't sure it was even going to be sustainable until I read the China study, and that became the basis for me believing the Cowspiracy. I just couldn't get my head around that Cowspiracy could be real. It was just so foreign.
Yeah, I mean, you make mention of the China study. It's probably the most referenced book that we've had on the show in terms of how many, and including for myself and Emma, it's one of those books that got us onto our respective journeys as well, because there's the science. It's not just a story. Yeah. It's actual evidence. But what just quick little question on that. Conservation, you've got a bigger appreciation for wild animals. You still were able to make that distinction between, okay, farmed animals, yes, contributes to the gross, the massive carbon emissions and the cruelty and so on, but wild animals, that's what we were meant to eat. That's what we used to hunt. Yet you still managed to withdraw yourself from that. I mean, I'm curious a little bit more about your thinking as to why you decided, no, just no animals required. So, in other words, hunting in the wild. I mean, that's the argument for some people. They won't have farmed animals, but they'll hunt their meat.
Yeah, well, I guess for me, I've always seen the wildlife as such a precious resource that we have left, and so special, and that there's only, since I've been really involved in it since the early 2000s, they're now confined into very, very small areas of the world. We really do struggle to provide a home for them. So hunting those animals for me has never been something that we should do. They're just too precious. There's just not enough of them. Maybe if I'd been born 100, 150 years earlier, I would have had a very different viewpoint when they were so abundant, but they're not now. And my love of rhino, rhino was saved from the brink of extinction back in the early 1900s. With white rhino in South Africa, they were down to between 50 and 100 units left, and they were restored from that with the lack of genetic material. They were restored from that to about 20,000 by 2007. One of the greatest success stories in conservation that we've ever had. And then to find that they were being poached again, and when that poaching happened, that was what really triggered me into starting to support wildlife seriously. Because my spiritual home, I guess, is Umfolozi Park in South Africa, in a camp called Impila Camp. And we were going to visit one day, and my friend Shelley mentioned that there were 3 rhinos that had been shot and poached. And I go, why on earth would anyone want to poach a rhino? I thought, are they eating them? What do they need it for? And she said, no, it's for the horn, and it ends up in China. And I thought, is she for real? Is this really a thing? And as I came back the next year, and it was 7 or 9, I think, and I thought, we have to stop this. And at that time, their business was doing very well, and I'd actually got to a point in life which very few people do, where you can actually earn more than you can spend. And I thought, well, let's put some money towards conservation. So I was incredibly lucky that Shelley's husband was a lawyer, and her kids were game rangers, or their partners were game rangers. And I was talking to the kids about this problem, And I said, I want to do something to help, but I don't want to give money to an aid organisation where it all just disappears in administration. And in Africa, it's even worse with a lot of things we don't really know who they are, what they're doing. I said, well, how can I help in a meaningful way? And one of the kids had said he'd been on a wilderness safari with one of the section rangers in Umfolozi, and he said they need uniforms, Pete. They're in khakis. They're now being shot at with AK-47s, the rangers, and the government won't buy them camouflage uniforms. So we went and brought uniforms from a uniform manufacturer. We got their sizes, brought them uniforms, and then gave them to the honorary rangers who gifted them to the rangers. So the rangers got these beautiful uniforms that we'd brought wholesale. And I thought, wow, that's an incredible way effective way to use my funds. And then they needed backpacks and camouflage nets, and then we went on to doing bigger and better things, but doing it really at grassroots level where we could have the most impact.
To our listeners, Umfolozi, that's part of the Shoshului Umfolozi game part. It's private, I believe, north of Durban, so on the eastern part of South Africa. Stunning, one of the best game parks, honestly, to go visit. But you talk about, the way you contribute, and that's the point of difference is you're creating relationships and going straight to the source, aren't you? I mean, that's the real point of difference. You're contributing to something directly and seeing a direct impact, as opposed to, like you say, with all good merit, with a lot of big organizations that get lost. It gets lost in the system.
Yeah, that's very true. Umfolozi's a national park as well, not private.
Oh, is it national? Okay, yeah.
Very fantastic. But yeah, it's a massive point of difference. And then when we started working through some of our funding through game, we ran some trips, some camping trips, safari camping trips in Africa, and charged a premium to come on them to go to conservation. So the theory was that we didn't make money out of running the trip. We made it as cheap as we could for the people, but they paid between $1,000 and $2,500 per person to come on the trip. And that money went to conservation, and that conservation was spent by me going and visiting these projects and following up afterwards to make sure that that the work was completed. So although we probably only raised maybe $300,000 or $400,000, that's quite a significant amount. We've been able to make huge inroads with that money because we don't have any administration charges. None of that money is spent on my airfares. None of it's spent on not a single cent is spent on me or any administration for the work. So it all goes to the fund, the causes, and then I personally follow up to make sure they happen. If they say they're going to build kennels for anti-poaching dogs, I'll go and view those kennels. If they say they're going to educate kids, I'll go into a classroom and see it happen. So, yeah. It's to me, it's the best way that I can guarantee the best use of people's funds that they're trusting with me.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you've got a lot of good transparency measures in place, which is fantastic. But you've got a lot of various projects that you're involved with under the Tanglewood Foundation. Can you talk us through some of the main ones?
Yeah, we do movies. We've helped support a lot of movies. I like to think of my money as impact money in the way that I'm often the one that comes in at the end, Tanglewood's often the one that comes in at the end when there's a project that's not got enough money to get across the line, or they've exhausted public funding, or crowd fundraising. So many films, they get to the end. Films always cost more to produce than anyone ever thinks they will. And it's the last 20,000 or 50,000 that really is... It can break the camel's back for these people. So that's where I come in a lot of the time.
And a lot of our listeners will recall our first guest of this year, Michal Silvesky, film producer of a number of amazing documentaries, but the latest one, Takeout, and he did mention your amazing support, Peter, for that project and for ongoing work as well. So, yeah, we've certainly had a little insight into how much work is entailed in getting these films over the line.
Yeah. with Takeout, our funding helped him do it quickly. We didn't require him to go and get any crowdfunding, which is always a difficult thing. And you know, Michal works on his own. He doesn't have a team of people to go and do this work for him. If he has to crowd fundraise, he's not taking the films. He's not making the impact that he's really good at. So, you know, he really needs that type of funding is really helpful for him. And we helped a lot in diet fiction as well.
Yeah.
Again, you know, there's only so much you can get from the public in a crowd fundraising. Everyone, you know, get after $5, $10, $50 or $100 at a time. That's a lot of people you've got to get a significant amount. So that's a big thing. Another really hugely successful film that we supported was a film called Strup, and that's about rhino poaching. An incredibly impactful movie. The girls, Bonet and Susan, I think they've had something like 21 different awards around the world, film awards at film festivals and things. Incredibly moving film, an incredibly huge expose. It's already 2 years old, but it's not a single bit out of date as far as I can see. It's just one of those things that's telling a story, the definitive story of rhino poaching. So if you want to know about how that all happens, watch that movie. But yeah, we've got a New Zealand one coming up. I can't say too much about it because it's under wraps, but it's coming out within the next few months, and that's around the milk industry, exposing the damage that the milk industry is doing to the country, and the cost of it to the country. And we've all been fed this lie that milk's good for us, that we need to have milk for calcium, that we can't grow into healthy people without it. We feed it to our children. I had to drink it when I was a kid in school, and we used to get those horrible little milkshake sachets to try and make it drinkable because it was warm. And the worst thing we should be feeding our kids, and that's our government's still doing it. So I don't want to get on my hobby horse on that one.
And I see another recent, I'd say relatively recent to a lot of the other films, is The Eye of the Pangolin, which is also quite current in terms of, you know, related to the whole COVID pandemic and obviously in I think Chinese culture in terms of its cure or supposed remedies for certain illnesses and so on. But it's horrific how many of those are poached as well. So that's quite a recent one, I see.
Yeah, and it's also been related to the rhino in a funny sort of a way, or a very unusual connection. So the Chinese medicine around, there's lots of reasons why the rhino is poached, but the Chinese medicine reason for it is that it's believed to be a cooling medication, so that if you've got a fever, you take the round rhino horn to reduce your temperature. And in later years, it's being promoted because, you know, this is a big business for the people that are trafficking this stuff. And if you're caught trafficking rhino horn, crimes, the fines and the imprisonment is so low, it's just a joke. But so they encourage now. There was no mention of cancer back in the day in the Chinese pharmacology thing, but nowadays in Vietnam, you're taught that if you have chemotherapy, you should have some rhino horn with it because that'll reduce the temperature from the fever from the chemotherapy. Now, how that can be brought into, how we can bring old Chinese remedies into modern medicine, it's ridiculous. And we've proven many times that, you know, a Disprin is going to be way better, or a Panadol is going to be way better for you than any piece of rhino horn. But rhino is getting very scarce now because they've poached most of them. Asians have killed all of theirs, and now they're into the African ones. And pangolin scales also are in the same category. They are cooling. So in some way, the lack of rhino now is creating this demand for pangolin scales. And then the pangolin itself is a delicacy in restaurants in Asia. So they try and keep live pangolin. It's really it's horrific. And the amount of, I think last year there were 97 ton of scales caught.
Oh my goodness.
And they reckon that's 20% of the market. And now there's 160 grams of scales on a pangolin. So 97 tons is, I don't even know how you get to the number that's been taken out of the... Now, pangolin eat ants and termites. So are we going to end up with an abundance of ants and termites?
So and it's going to destroy a lot of crops that,
And trees, Ben. What about all the trees? Are we going to lose forests because we've got no pangolin in there? We're not going to know this straight away, but one thing's for certain, the pangolin's a hugely intelligent being. It's unique. It's amazing, and it doesn't deserve to be culled out of Africa by people wanting to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just going back to the rhinos, growing up in South Africa myself, I was quite passionate about conservation to some degree. And one thing that always interested me, I don't know if it's still current, but there was a dehorning project. So to demotivate, poachers, we're taking the horns off. But the problem was they were still killing the rhinos and just digging out the little that was left in the skull of the rhino. Because any bit of horn is still valuable, hugely valuable. Does that still happen? Are there improvements with that? I mean, nowadays it still amazes me that there's the poaching, because surely I would have thought they would have dehorned them all by now just to save the rhino.
Well, dehorning's a temporary measure because it grows back then. So, every 3 or 4 years you've got to dehorn them again, and it's not cheap. To dehorn a rhino, it's typically, if you've got a helicopter and you're only doing one rhino, it's going to cost around about 1,000 to 2,000 New Zealand dollars. So if you can do 4 or 5 rhinos at the same time, that's good. But they don't hang around in groups, and you can't dart them all at the same time and work on them all at the same time, because you've only got a limited time that you can deal with them. You've got to get a rhino onto its side quickly, and then it's got to be got back up within 40-odd minutes. Otherwise, its internal organs start crushing each other. So it's a really complicated and tough process. So, and as far as the poachers, sometimes the poachers are hunting these animals at night, and they'll come up behind and they'll make a kill shot, and they'll only after they've killed it do they realise that there's
there's no horn.
Yeah. And then there's some people that they've tracked there's some poachers that might track a rhino for an hour or even all night, and then it's got no horn, so they shoot it anyway, so they don't track it again the next night.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's the female with a young baby that's targeted, isn't it? Because they're likely to stay around and defend their young rather than run away as the male would. So it's two rhinos dying for the one horn.
Yeah, and Emma, they're 16 months in utero, so, and then they're 18 months to 2 years staying with the mother, and they're relying on the mother. So you've got a 4-year period, 3 to 4 year period between calves, and a baby's reliant on the mother for most of the time. So if the statistics say 1,000 rhino were poached, there's actually 1,500 casualties usually.
Yeah, gosh, okay.
And that's not to mention the PTSD that they're finding with rhino, where they're no longer hanging around socializing so well, they're going deep into the bush. The numbers of poaching rhinos way down. Last year it was only 426, but they've lost so many. They've lost 70% of the rhino in 10 years. And I've been following this for 14 years, so they've lost 70% of the rhino. So we're now starting to get down to some serious numbers. And people from our part of the world, they go, well, why didn't the army just go in? But they don't seem to realize that the area of Kruger, for instance, which is one of the most attacked areas, it's the size of, you put a line between the half of the top of the North Island, and it encompasses the whole of that area down to Wellington, and it's long and skinny. And on one border, you've got an impoverished country, Mozambique, with no fence, and even if there is a fence, they can cut it and come through. And you've got 95% unemployment, and you've got poachers that'll get the equivalent of $200 to poach a rhino, and if you stop one of those poachers, then there's another 2,000 ready to take its place. So it's a very difficult situation to get on top of the rhino poaching.
Now we'll carry on with this, but let's just take one step back. Tell us overall what the Tanglewood Foundation is all about.
That's a very good question, Ben, because and that's something that's taken me on a bit of a journey, because I've often just responded to where I've been asked for help and where my passion lies. And then my passion's expanded from just animals into veganism and then the sea and general environment, and now it's led me down the garden path, not the garden path, led me down the rabbit hole, that actually everything that I'm doing with this foundation is actually band-aids on a dying patient. And to really make a significant difference, we really need to do something to stop climate change, because if we don't have reduction in temperature, it doesn't matter. The rhino are going to die, and the elephants are going to die of all sorts of things. We're all going to die. So last Christmas, Christmas before COVID, probably in November before that, I'd come out of business in September. I'd sold the business, it was no longer working. And I did a big deep dive and say, I'm incredibly lucky to be in a position where I've been paid a huge amount of money for my business. And there's more money than I can spend in my lifetime, or that I would want to spend in my lifetime. And I don't want to leave huge amounts for my children, because I think I'd like to leave something for them, but I don't want to leave them so much that it ruins their lives. And so what can I do to really make a difference? And that led me on to an amazing project that we're just embarking on in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, where we're regenerating farmland which was ruined by farmers farming goats on a very, very special biome, which is called the Albany Thicket, which is like a succulent forest in a semi-arid area. So this area, it's unique in the world. It's said to sequester as much carbon as the Amazon rainforest when it's in its right position. It's in the arid area where nothing will grow otherwise other than this. Where they've had fires in the Eastern Cape, they've raged right through all the areas until they've hit this biome, and this biome doesn't burn. This biome is suitable for elephants and rhino, which used to roam there. In fact, elephants and rhino help spread it because it's succulent. When they chew it, little bits fall out of their mouth, and that spreads and starts new plants. So this land that was turned that somehow we started farming sheep and goats on has completely denuded the landscape, and there's no topsoil left in some areas to the extent of the degradation. And so the plan is this very audacious plan from this group of amazing Eastern Cape people is to connect two major game reserves with regenerating this farmland in between of 860,000 hectares. So that could make a significant difference to the world's climate. That's enough to be seen from space. This is one of the hugest projects. And so we've been financing work around that. Tanglewood put the money in to do a huge study to identify which farms would be involved, what the state of them is, what the targets are, which ones we should aim to get it, because the idea has not just carbon sequestration, it also has biodiversity, because if we can find more space for the elephants and rhinos, we win on two accounts. And there's also huge unemployment down there, so we've got a lot of ready working people that want to do the work to repair the landscape. So we've identified from the study that's taken the last year a farm to buy, and that farm will be the showcase for the project, and it'll also be the ground zero where we grow the plants and we start planting them out. And it's an old farm, and the homestead will be a visitor centre where we can bring the really serious donors that can come in and fund this type of restoration work that could really make a difference. So, and they've done work to identify that by restoring this biome, and if the carbon credit market continues, they can get more carbon credits that will make a profit on top of buying the land and restoring it. So for a 30-year period, we could go to someone like Nike or Adidas or Elon Musk or someone else and say, hey, do you want to buy 100,000 hectares and you'll be carbon neutral forever? You'll have such a wonderful story, and you might even make money under a certain set of circumstances. You're certainly not making a donation. You're making an investment in the future. It's like this is the vision these guys have got. So Tanglewood's going to fund the first farm. We're in the process of transferring the money for that first farm at the moment, and I'm going to be over there within a few months or a couple of months, and we'll be getting it started. I won't be involved directly. It'll be run by the Wilderness Foundation. which has its roots back with Ian Player, who saved the rhino in Umfolozi Shishlui. So it's an incredible little whole circle, you know.
So where in the East Cape is this in relation to Port Elizabeth, the Addo Elephant National Park, East London? Give us a little bit of bearing there.
So this goes between Addo and Fish River, so along through Grahamstown in the centre. So right in that valley in the middle there's quite a lot of private reserves like Quandway, Amakala, Lullaby, yeah.
We'll have to put a map up on with our social media to show our listeners.
Yeah, I'm totally lost at the moment.
But look, the Addo Elephant National Park is one of the most amazing, underrated game parks in South Africa for sure. It's massive, and you're bound to literally bump into a lot of elephants there amongst a lot of other wonderful wildlife. So it's pretty close to that area basically.
Yeah, and you'll understand the Albany thicket because the Addo is based around the Albany thicket. That speck boom and 120 other succulent type plants. That's pure Albany thicket there. We want to extend that back into where it was before the farmers took it out. So yeah, it's a very ambitious project, but for me that's something that is really dear to my heart because that exactly funds what I wanted to fund. One, it's like, you know, I'm seed funding something that could attract huge amounts of money from people that can afford to do something. You know, why do we have Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos from Amazon? Why do we have these guys wanting to go to Mars? Why don't we just get them to help us fix Earth?
Exactly.
You know, we've got these ridiculous amounts of money vested in individuals and people like Bill Gates. This might be controversial, but I have the most admiration for Bill and Melinda Gates for the work they do. And you know, we need more people who've got money to turn their lives around and get the satisfaction and fulfillment that these guys are getting for the work they're doing at grass levels in Africa. Because it's hugely fulfilling. You know, people say, why do you do it? Why don't I go to the Maldives and, you know, why don't I do all these, lie back and enjoy my life? For me, I get massive enjoyment out of doing this, and I get massive satisfaction, and I can have those still moments where I can be really happy that I've done what I believe is the right thing.
Yep. And it sounds like this new project is the perfect example of sustainable development, where, you know, the economy, society, and environment are all kind of meeting there. Is it possible for people who are interested to get in and help now, or do they need to wait a little while?
There probably is, but because this project's going to be run by Wilderness Foundation, and I mean, this I'm not even sure I'm even supposed to be talking about this on the radio yet.
Oh, okay.
But I'll let them know I've done it tonight. They can start planning because they should be able to set up some sort of a fundraising portal for people that want to get involved in it. Because honestly, every cent helps in this thing here. You know, the people in the Eastern Cape, I don't know what their wages are, but for New Zealand dollars, I'd be surprised if they're getting more than $1 an hour.
Well, it's one of the poorer provinces of South Africa, and exchange rate doesn't help either. So, yeah,
it helps a donor because a donor can make a huge difference from New Zealand and Australia. You know, $20, $10, that's massive. You know, $10 will get someone a full day working for a full day, and they can do a lot of work in a full day. You know, and that when you the other thing about paying someone to do a job in Africa. If you pay one person, it usually feeds 10.
That's right. Now, we've been talking a lot about stuff you're doing outside of New Zealand, but you have been involved in projects locally in New Zealand, and in particular, there's been some involvement with Zealandia in Wellington. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? And then also, I see there was a campaign to stop, is it sea dredging or something off the west coast of the South Island as well?
North Island, seabed mining, yeah. So Zealandia first. If you're ever in Wellington, then Zealandia is definitely a place you must visit. Last year, it was on the top 100 Time magazine places to visit in the world. It's an eco-sanctuary in the middle of Wellington. So the old Karori water reservoir, it hasn't been farmed since, I think, the 60s, and it's grown beautiful native bush. It's 270-odd hectare area. And it was because it was the reservoir for Wellington, no one was allowed in there because it was a biosecurity area. So it was left to regenerate largely on its own. And then when they decommissioned the dams for water, the question went out what to do with it. And this guy called Jim Lynch came up with this crazy idea of putting a predator-proof fence around the outside of it, getting rid of all of the pests inside, particularly, Emma, I'm afraid to say,
possums.
Terrible threats for us here.
It's a recurring thing on this show.
Yeah, so they're so treasured in your country and so not treasured in ours. It's such a sad. It's a shame we can't put a one-way bridge across. Just let it go back. But they got rid of all the predators, and then now they've created a sanctuary within 10 minutes from the city, which is actually inside the Wellington city, and it's full of New Zealand's treasures. We've got tuataras, hundreds of tuatara in there. I went in just a few weeks ago and saw 12 different tuatara. There's kiwi. There's all sorts. They've brought back the kaka parrot, which is an incredible parrot. Hadn't been on the mainland, I think, for 100 years. It caused a lot of problems with the botanical garden because they'd put a lot of exotic trees in since then, and then the kakas went and attacked all the exotic trees, and so there's a bit of a problem between the two of them, but they've sorted it out. But the bird life in Wellington now is superb because that's radiated out from there, and also the predator-free Wellington campaigns radiated out from there. So, and I'm from Wellington originally. I'm from Wainuiomata and Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt and Petone, and so Wellington has a place dear in my heart. And talking to them and visiting them, I just love the project because it's lovely being involved in African, the conservation, but I really want to do something at home as well. And this is something where they really have a 500-year plan. They're 25 years into a 500-year plan of restoration. That's vision and things that I'd love to have a little part of somewhere along the line. So one thing they were looking for funding for was a centre for people in excellence, a centre for people in nature, where they could have people, students or people doing their doctorate on conservation. They could have a place there. So I think different universities will have a seat in this, an office in this room. It'll be an area for the volunteers to get together, a centre, a place to record help them record what they're doing and emphasise the work and spread the work out into the community. And that'll be called Tanglewood House. So we've got naming rights on that building too. And that's, I think, building starting in a few months' time. So it's run a long way behind. And then the Kiwis against seabed mining. So there's a connection there through my daughter, who worked at a place called Soulscape in Raglan, which is a beautiful retreat, health and wellness retreat. Was run by dear friends of mine, Phil and Bernadette. And Phil's passionate about the sea, and he was the high up in the chasm, and I heard about it through my daughter working at his business. Heard about the amazing work he was doing, and they're up against huge industry trying to preserve the seabed. The industry wants to come in and effectively suck all of the seabed up into a boat, process it looking for minerals, and then just spurt it out the back down to where it came from, leaving huge dust plumes, and will kill everything on the seabed floor. Out of sight, out of mind. No one really gives a damn because it's, that no one. So the scientists on their side were saying there's nothing there, it's dead floor. And so these volunteers, these people from the community, including the iwi from up and down the coast, and people who really, they're fundraising with cake stalls and sponsored walks and things, trying to get funds to stop this huge industry with all their lawyers. So they were really at a bit of a disadvantage. So I came in and helped out with some lawyers' costs and some funding for some of their day-to-day stuff. So the amount of money that I gave them was relatively small, but huge in the context of it. And so far they're winning. So they're holding off these mining people. So I'm absolutely loving the result from there. I think there's another challenge in court at the moment, but hopefully we're going to get through that. each challenge we seem to make more ground, which is great. But we're nearly there, I think. But this is happening all over the world. It's also happening in Namibia and other places. So if New Zealand, in a first world country, I think we have more chance of the people standing up against this and being able to set an example, and then other countries can look at it. So Phil's now involved in Papua New Guinea. There's mining. They're trying to mine off there. We just can't afford to lose the treasures that are in the sea as well as the treasures that we've lost on land.
There was a recent success, Emma, off the south of Australia, the Blythe.
In the Bight, yes, yeah. I can't speak to the details of that because I haven't seen any news updates on it in a few months. But yeah, we've successfully stalled that for the time being, which is good because that's a really important breeding ground for great white sharks, I think, and a whole lot of other kind of marine wildlife there. So that's one little win.
All these little wins do add up. So yeah.
Yeah, we're coming up against so much big money with these people that are, capitalism is, it's supposed to be working for us, but it works against us in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there is another concept, earth building, that you're involved in.
Yeah, well, that was from my daughter, really. I've got 3 kids, and my daughter's the hippie. She's not really a hippie, but she spent a lot of time in she's the one that can live on the least amount of money, and she's the one that connects with the spiritual side of life far better than the rest of us. And so she's introduced me to a lot of things. I did introduce veganism to her. Everyone's pretty shocked at that because they expected her to be the vegan and me to be the one to follow her, but it was the other way around. That's about the only thing that I've taught her. The rest of it I've all come from her. So she'd been working on a few earth building projects, and she did one over in Waiheke, and then she wanted to start a retreat, a wellness retreat with meditation and yoga in Nicaragua, but she decided to come back to New Zealand and was looking for a place to do that. And so she came and I said, why don't you build it on my property? Because I'm 10 minutes from Muriwai Beach, and we have this land that was built around horses, but the horses all left with the ex-wife, and we now got this land that we wanted to repurpose, and I was quite happy to repurpose it for people. So she wanted to do it all in recycled and reuse everything and make natural buildings, and she wanted to have a cob house. So, with dads like to make their daughters happy. So, yes, she got herself finally, after about 30 years of asking, or 20 years of asking, she got herself a pirate ship and a tree and a cob house.
So what exactly is a cob house? I see on the notes here, straw bale, mud. So it's basically just building off just raw materials off the earth, just like we used to for centuries.
When I try to tell my friends in Africa, like they say, "Do you mean like a house?" So it's exactly right. People have been doing it for centuries. So the cob style itself probably really originates from the UK, I guess, the term. But it's straw, clay, and sand, and it's put together with a lime plaster on the outside. The beauty of it is that it breathes, and you don't have any poisonous chemicals inside. We have tannalized timber in our houses. Then we put jib board up, which often has things that are undesirable. Then we paint it over with paints that are giving off toxic fumes, and then we seal the whole house up. And so it's hot in summer and cold in winter, and we have to open windows to regulate it. We put an air conditioning system in, and we make a very unhealthy environment for ourselves. We're either damp or dry or everything else that we don't want to have. Whereas in a cob house, they breathe. They hold the heat. They have very thick walls, so they hold the heat in the summer and give a cooling effect. And in the winter, they insulate against the cold. So they're a beautiful. Just being inside a cob house is like the difference between a Dreamliner airplane and an old style airplane, where there's so much more oxygen in the air and there's so much more humidity and it's so much healthier. And it's just a no-brainer that we should be having something like this in our lives. So when the cob house was finished, one of the guys on the build connected me with the Earth Building Association of New Zealand, who were trying to fund building standards around earth building, which there weren't any in New Zealand. So it made it very hard for you to build an earth building and get it through council. So now we helped some funding towards getting those regulations through. So when I build my next house, it'll be an earth building house. I'll be able to do it because I can do it legally through council because we've helped pay for the regulations that were there. Not that I had any intentions of doing one, but during lockdown, I brought another property next door to where we are in Tanglewood, and I'd love to make that property around natural building and tiny house living and an alternative way of building a community. So that's kind of another project that I've got going on at the moment in New Zealand.
You're quite a change maker. Now, this is all part of Tanglewood Retreat, isn't it? And you offer workshops on sustainable living there.
We don't offer as many as we should. We're going to be offering more in the future. And we'd love to. Doing yoga and meditation and workshops and things like that. Stacey runs quite a lot of different programs. COVID's really taken a bit of a toll on a lot of that. And then we were running the festival. The New Zealand Spirit Festival was to be this weekend, and now thanks to our current lockdown, we won't be able to run that. So going forward, she will be looking at what she wants to do going forward with the retreat and how we might step it up for the future.
Yeah. Now, look, it's obvious that you're super passionate about conservation and sustainability, and you want to leave the world in better shape through your actions. And you've worked really hard. You've been fortunate in your business outcomes, but that's because of that hard work. But
actually, I'm going to add in, it's because people like you and I have bought those Mad Millie products make our sauerkrauts, to make our cheeses, to make all the... So thank you, Peter.
That's smart business, quite savvy.
So we've all contributed somehow.
That's true.
Thank you so much.
But you're now using your resources for such valuable projects. You're giving back, you're taking action. And we always love to encourage our listeners here to take action wherever they can. So Peter, what's your advice on how to make a positive impact on our planet? What should we be trying to do with the resources that we have available?
The first and foremost and the most important thing that people can do is watch what they're eating. I went vegan not because I don't like meat. I went vegan because I believe it's best for the planet. And as I went vegan, I've learned so much more about how good that diet is for me. An example of, I read the China study and I knew that, your cholesterol should drop and everything else, but I didn't actually believe it would happen, right? And here's me, a businessman under a lot of pressure. A lot of the time we had businesses in 3 different countries around the world, one in Brisbane, one in Auckland, and one in Chester in the UK, or Ellesmere Port in the UK. So running all those businesses was very, very stressful. So when I went vegan, I was on a lot of medication, cholesterol reducing, blood pressure. I can't remember the other ones, but within 6 months or 9 months of going vegan, because I had a little bit of a hiccup to start with, because you can have a very unhealthy vegan diet, and I learned about that pretty quickly. So when I got onto a more healthy vegan diet with lots more legumes and greens and things, and staying away from, those alternative foods are nice, and they're better than having meat products, but really you can make a far better diet by eating proper foods.
Just going whole food.
As they were made to start with.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Plant-based whole foods. And within 9 months, all of those medications were no longer needed. I lost 18 kilos. I was healthier. My memory was back. My staff used to have a field day that they would say, "Oh, I don't remember you saying that, Pete." And then I'd be able to say later on, "No, I did say it." And so, they didn't like the fact that my memory came back so well. But for me, silly little, you read in the China study, or that you're going to lose those aches and pains, that your inflammation's going to go down, and I didn't truly believe all that. But within 6 weeks, I think, I worked at a standing desk. I no longer had to wear the special orthotics in my feet to be able to stay standing without pain all day. And it wasn't until I saw them back in the cupboard one day, I was thinking, crikey, I hadn't even worn those things for months. And I realized, wow, those aches and pains have gone. My health is so much more improved. We were looking at photos just last night of me 10 years ago, and it's actually 12, 13 years ago, and we were laughing at how much the kids have grown because it was my son's 21st birthday. And Stacey goes, look at Dad. He looks younger now than he did 14 years ago. And it was stunning. I didn't even recognize the guy in that picture. So, it's just, I'm not sure what we're talking about, but that's
taking
that's
action.
Given you more energy to take action on various projects. You're probably feeling better. You've got more energy to do things. So it all kind of plays a role there.
And that's actually 2 points on that. One, firstly, exactly what Emma said. You re-energized, motivated, stimulated, so you can actually do more because you're looking after yourself. But then the flip side is, and this is something we've been starting to say more frequently, is there's no point in being the healthiest person standing on this planet when there's no longer a planet to stand on. So, changing diet is absolutely crucial. What we eat has a direct correlation to the impact it has on the planet. But we still also need to look beyond that and actually say, well, what are we doing to the planet and what can we do to improve the situation there? Yeah.
Your original question was, what can people do? So the first thing they can do is look at what they're eating. Reduce or eliminate animal products. So important. Secondly, try and buy local. And that's a bit of a problem for some vegans. But if you're not eating the meat and you're not able to buy local, you're better off, I believe. But what's on the end of your knife and fork, that's something immediately that you can influence. And then from there, if you do have spare money, spend it wisely. If you're going to if you want to make some donations to causes, think carefully about what the outcome is that you want and what's the most impactful way that you can make that donation. Just making a donation isn't enough. Many aid organizations, I'm not going to name any but most of them are only 15 to 40% of the donation ends up doing any good at the other end. And it's usually so politically motivated or that a lot of it is not very impactful. That I don't want to decry the work that they're doing because they are doing great work, but there are ways that you can make impact by being a little bit more conscious with your money. And a lot of those things now are your GoFundMes for the sort of projects that you want to get involved in. Much more direct route for the funds. And if you are going to make a significant GoFundMe donation, say you're going to give $500 or $1,000, don't do it through the GoFundMe site. Go directly to the people. Ask them. Send them an email. Ask them what their bank details are. Pay their bank and save them 8% of the money you're donating. It's like, there's lots of ways you can help. And we don't take funds ourselves, but if people want to know, they can contact me and I can direct them.
Yeah, look, Peter, it's you're for someone, including myself, before I actually got to know you, I honestly thought you were from Africa. Your love and passion for conservation in Africa, it sort of sets an example that whilst us on our podcast, we talk a lot about, yes, there's a lot that happens around the world, but we've got our own challenges here in New Zealand and Australia, and we actually there's actually a lot of action that needs to be taken locally here as well. But at the same time, there are significant, I'll use the word challenges rather than issues that happen abroad that we do need to care about, that has a bigger impact on the bigger picture. So, some of the work that you do in Africa can impact all of us. If a particular animal like the rhino goes completely extinct, that's it. It's gone. It's gone forever. But also this new project that you're involved in the Eastern Cape, that can have a massive global impact. So, it's about, like you say, sharing our or being wiser with how we get involved, how we get in, take action, and where we contribute our time and money. So it's been such an important lesson, this conversation, and we really thank you for that. So again, thank you for your time, sharing these amazing stories and giving us a valuable lesson in terms of how we should be taking action in the future.
Yeah, and I think, something that's important is that, I wasn't earning a lot of money when I started doing this work, and I had no idea where it was going to end. I know it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but I honestly believe that the more you do for others, the more you get back yourself. It's like, and I also believe that when you go vegan, you look at the world in a different light. You have more compassion, and you have, so the little things you do along the way, you get rewards in much different ways than you might expect. You're not even expecting a reward for it, but you do get rewarded for it. So it's a hard thing to explain, but I think, the more you give, the more you get, I think is probably the simplest way to put it. The connections I've made, the people that I can call my friends, it's just tremendous. It's invaluable. And I'm incredibly blessed the position I'm in. You said you thought I was African. Well, I feel African, and my African friends think I'm African from a former life or something. But I have a huge affinity to that country, and also, it's tough for Africans, especially South Africans. Ben, you'll know that their life they're worried about putting a roof on their own head. Doesn't matter whether you're black or white in South Africa. There's crime, there's all sorts of things to worry about. They haven't got time to worry about the animals. If someone doesn't worry about the rhino and the elephants, then they'll be gone. And the people in Africa that do worry about them, they usually don't have any money and they need help. I could give you a dozen, like people like Elephants Alive. They take money internationally easily, and yet they do the most incredible work. I could go on for an hour telling you just about Elephant Alive's work out there. You want to open up natural corridors and using plants and bees to help protect the gardens from elephant raiding, so that the people in the villages let the elephants pass and can live in harmony with them. These sorts of projects are amazing, but they all need funding. So maybe I can give you a list of a few organisations that people could look to donate to if you were keen.
Please do. We'll put them in the show notes. That would be great.
Yeah, so Peter, again, thank you so much for your time, and we're really, really appreciative of it. And good luck with the upcoming trip and getting this whole Eastern Cape project well on the road.
Absolutely. Exciting. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being able to chat today. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Lentil Intervention podcast. If you found this interesting, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends.